we would like to thank you for being here and participate this first IT Governance Turkey's international webinar. We have a special guest, Mr. Håkan Ozan, who will talk about IT strategies and innovation. So you are the game changers.
Session है.
Our attendees who can unmute. Please unmute.
Yep. So we will talk about innovation strategies and IT leading strategies during this webinar. Before that, we would like to give a short brief who we are, what we are doing, why we are here. We are IT Governance Turkey. We are a non-profit organization, which we are all volunteer, who is trying to make change and support the people and companies during the digital transformation with translations and international global article translations. So you can have more information at www.itgovernanceturkey.com, or you can follow us on the LinkedIn. So my name is Kerem Ulusoy. I'm a co-founder of IT Governance. I have experience on strategic planning, internal audit, and risk management, almost 9 years. And I have a colleague, Can Tekin. Please explain yourself.
Yeah, I can also briefly mention about myself. I'm outcome-focused IT governance professional, IT governance and compliant processes. I have over 6 year commercial experience. I have innovation master degree, and I am organizing events and trainings on IT governance, innovation, and agile transformation for almost 2 years. And maybe we can discuss about our agenda. Kerem?
First of all, if we think about COVID-19 is a milestone, first of all, we will discuss what is our current situation, what is changing, and what will change. And after that, Mr. Ozan will tell us the IT strategies, innovation, and digitalization. And please share your questions on the chat and put capital Q in front of it so we can collect, and later on we can ask Mr. Ozan after the session. We will have 15-minute Q&A session, Q&A time, so we will ask that.
Yeah, please join us in order to make interactive presentation. Okay.
So for the IT people, let's say, here is the boring stuff. What is the traditional economy right now changing their habits? First of all, we see that all commercial approaches are actually supply chain management is failing, and they are trying to change with robots, drones, autonomous vehicles, and the future will be much more digital. So currently, some countries already finishing their COVID stances, but some countries are trying to reach the peak, like US and other countries, as you can see on the graphic. So the life will never be the same again. Thank you. And more, the companies are trying to reach us by digital devices, applications, and we are currently in these situations. We have a depression in an economical way and also in a lifestyle way. We are not going out, we are staying home, we are watching Netflix, Disney, etc., etc. We are giving orders from Alibaba, Amazon, and they are delivering by drones. So everything is changing. Now, Can Tekin, it's your turn.
Yes, this is one funny quote from the Elon Musk. A few months ago, we feared robots would take all the jobs. Today, we almost wish they already had. Yes, just I want to mention briefly about the digital economy. In this challenging time, the digital platforms are rising amazingly. You can see the daily traffic of these digital platforms, Facebook, Netflix, YouTube kind of platforms. You can see. And Alibaba declared that their daily turnover reached $38 billion. It's really amazing. $38 billion is more than Coca-Cola, eBay, Xiaomi, McDonald's, Starbucks annual turnover in these challenging times. And so Asia economic outlook, a growing technological epicenter driven by digital transformation. By this year, 60% of the Asia-Pacific GDP will be derived from digital products or services created through digital transformation. And we have thus suddenly become reliant on services that allow us to work and learn from home. Zooms, you can see daily app sessions for popular remote work apps. Zoom's daily active users jumped from 10 million to 200 million in 3 months. So our needs are also changing. The economy is simply organizing the products or human civilization need what value we trade them with. There is no digital economy. Digital is simply the how. The companies surviving will be adaptive companies. This is adaptive economy, as you can see. There's a one funny question. Who led the digital transformation of your company? Unfortunately, COVID-19 led the digital transformation at nowadays. For the first time in the history, we are now completely technology dependent. It's your duty to help your relatives adapt. It's important how to adapt. Virus, climate, technology disruptions, environmental change are here to stay. Yes. Now we want to give the stage to Håkan Ozan. Kerem?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Let me just try to share my. I hope you can see right now. I'm hearing a lot of noise in the background though. Well, that was better. All right. Thank you both for having me here. I'm going to spend about an hour to give a little update on how IT strategy, digitalization, and innovation actually work together. I'll give a little brief of also why I claim to know something about it. Because as the world develops and is getting pushed extra now with the corona pandemic, things are really changing big time. So we're just hoping things will go along just the way we're hoping for. All right. This is what I will walk you through. I hope you hear me well and that you see the presentation as you're supposed to. First thing I will go through is the increasing value really of strategy and why strategy is becoming more important over time, because it's becoming really crucial. And I'll walk you through what factors are changing so much that it's becoming more vital. And secondly, I'll go through why today's IT leaders, where they have issues with working strategically, why it's not that as easy as we would hope it would be. And then thirdly, we'll go through how IT digitalization and innovation are actually interconnected, what the relationship is between the three of them, and from a strategic point of view also with other strategies. And then finally, I'll wrap it up with giving you an insight into how we strategically can work with IT digitalization and innovation in tandem to make sure they actually push each other forward with the synergetic effects, because that's really what it's all about. But we do require a strategic perspective to be certain to get there. Just short brief about myself. I'm not going to go through all of this, but if you're interested to know more about the kind of work that I do, you can go to håkanozan.net. Yes, I have a Turkish sounding name because my father's from Turkey, but I'm born and raised in Sweden, so I'm actually joining you from 100 miles away. I do have my master's in computer science, and I do have in business economics. I'm currently the CEO of something called Ministry of Digital Design, where I'm working with tech innovation, combining innovation management with emerging technologies to help clients work with future technologies even now to give them a competitive edge. But I come from a long background of, recently I was head of innovation at KPMG. Before that, I was a researcher, so I was head of a research institute. Before that, I was head of a research center at Uppsala University, focusing on IT research, but the combination of innovation management and IT. So I've been doing this for around 15, 20 years, understanding how innovation and IT are interconnected, especially and collaborating in distributed ways has emerged. It has become even more vital. But also, how do you organize yourself to make sure you become profitable in those areas? And I have been a CIO in India, and I spent many years as an IT strategy consultant and innovation manager at CSC, and so on. So I have a long background. Just so don't feel embarrassed to join me on LinkedIn. I'm very active there. I do post a lot. The write articles on my website, which are for free, and I post them on LinkedIn and so on. So if you are interested in getting more information, just feel welcome to join me there. For more details, though, let's go into the nitty-gritty. Strategy is becoming more and more important over time, much more so than it was just perfect honest. I don't know if you heard the term VUCA, but we're entering a VUCA world, which stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and one more, which I forgot. And the point is, the world is changing faster, it's becoming more uncertain, it's becoming more volatile overall. So the speed of change to modify how we need to interact with the future. We need to understand what is happening in much better places, which actually kind of rocks how we're supposed to work with. In fact, not only within IT, but in fact in any type of industry. And what is driving this is, I mean, traditionally we're used to having a structure as a leader for our coworkers or employees, and the point has always been to really direct. I tell you exactly what to do, and you follow my orders, run it. What is changing in the world is, and that's usually what's called transactional leadership, where transactional leadership means there's a transaction between you and me where you have a paycheck for, and as you follow my rules, you give me work in return. So it's sort of more of an official agreement type of leadership. What is changing a lot is we're coming into something called the knowledge economy, which everything technically that can be automated is being automated. So we don't have factory workers who just sits around producing the same thing. with RPA, robotics, and these things, because anything that is routine, especially as an IT, we're trying to get rid of. So what will be left is those kind of roles that require a high level of competence and specialized type of skills. And those, as a person, and that's why I have the image at the lower right, means they will know more about their work than you do. So how can you direct them and command them to do things which they know more about than you do? So leadership has to be on a higher level than before. You can't really tell them exactly what to do. You have to guide them in the right direction. Just trust them for being very good at what they do. So that type of leadership can change us, which means if you're going to guide them in a certain direction, you have to understand what that direction is. That's where strategy comes in as so much more important. So just focusing too much on telling people exactly what to do here and now is vanishing over time, and really is getting overall modified to more understanding what do I do with this team, how should they be complemented by different types of picture as a leader. So going into details is vanishing overall. Especially since people are becoming more and more skilled, because there's more competence among the high skilled. It's partially not even enough to have a university diploma anymore. Have to have like 10, 15 years of work experience, preferably 2 university degrees, to be really competitive. And those with high talent are being chased by, the more, shall we say, progressive organizations to understand. We need the best thinkers, because that's how we can be more competitive. So just getting routine workers is just a little too expensive. We need to have those that we need to manage differently. So into a world where Generation X and Generation Y and even Generation Z are actually coming in with completely different expectations than the older generation. They're expecting more freedom, they're expecting more responsibility, and if we can't offer that, they're going to go to the highest bidder instead. So facing that, we're going into a world where we have as a network director, have leadership networks as well. So we discuss this all the time, and some of them are going into modes where they don't even appoint leaders. In fact, employees are allowed to pick their own leader within the organization, which is a completely different approach to how leadership works. So you have to be skilled and be competitive as a leader. So we're going through a very rough shift at this point, where the old way of working is actually being exchanged. So the whole thing where I am the boss and there's a boss beneath me, and then I have 2 or 3 bosses beneath me, and there's a bunch of ants, at the lowest end, that is completely vanishing. It's actually going the other way around. So it's just about getting the workers to get the best work out of the workers, where workers are just, in fact, sets of skills that you need to manage in a certain direction. That direction technically is leadership or strategy, and making those work together. So what we're saying is we're moving from the transactional leadership into transformative leadership. And transformation is actually change per definition. And that rhymes with the VUCA world that we're going into. So we have to understand how to approach future change. And future change means, being strategic is understanding long term and understanding in what direction we should move and how and why, and so on, especially how. And where we're standing today, there's, especially for IT, there's a bunch of issues that we face, and because currently we're focusing a lot on operations generally. Perhaps you are not, but most IT managers are. But the leaders are actually going into details, trying to, use their skills in technology to help guide the leadership rather than being leaders per se. But Currently, what is changing is we can't focus on operations. We have to be aware of operations, being able to guide people there as well. But it's from just doing operations, it's all and strategy. So the scope of the IT leader is widening widely, meaning we have to understand how to connect strategy, tactics, and operations now, rather than just working with, knowing exactly how the network should work, or what kind of operating system people should have, or what kind of platform we should use. That's more and more irrelevant. It's more about leading people, making sure the future is secured. But there are things to consider, like like the cartoon that I have there, that's very common. Unfortunately, it's very common because there's a lot of competence in the strategic management with leaders. Typical board meeting, okay, 10 minutes left, let's do the strategy now. And it's not a lie, really, because they say, okay, as long as we set some goals, we're good to go, then we've done our work. But if you don't have good targets, leadership means leading people in a certain direction. And if you don't have that direction, you're just leading people in random. In fact, it might be worse to have crappy leaders who doesn't understand where to lead people than not having leaders at all. Because that will, when people have to understand how those work together, how we get into a strategy. And a strategy requires a lot of work. It's not just setting up random goals that you can manage to think of by yourself. It demands a lot of strategic intelligence, a lot of mapping out what markets look like, what the future trends look like, combining those into what kind of consequences will that have on our industry and on our organization in specific, and then finding out, so how do we need to act on a 3 to 5 year basis at least to figure out what kind of directions we should go to. And to be able to do that, we need to understand what kind of methodology to use. It's not just making things up random. I have the same issue when I work with innovation, because everyone thinks, innovation is easy. It's just making things up. But as a matter of fact, we have done research in innovation management, which is a discipline. When I start teaching this, when I start talking about it, people start to realize that, okay, so it's not just about being random and just coming up with something clever. Is actually how you establish an innovation management system in an organization, which is actually a huge skill set and a research area. So you have to understand how to work with strategy, what the methods are, how you can apply them, how you can do something concrete with all of this to make sure it actually becomes professional and you deliver good results. You have to understand, as part of the methodology, how do we work with strategic intelligence and foresight, for instance? Understand what do our competitors do, the mega trends and the market trends. How can we do foresight to see what kind of future we're going forward to understand how to start approaching that even now. The best compass actually looking like 20 years into the future to understand the big scope so that you can adjust accordingly from there. Because if the scope is in that direction and you think, well, currently I think this is a very good direction, you're probably you're going to start. It's like if you're going to do orientation and you don't have a map, you just run randomly. You should never do that. You need to do the proper analysis of what does the ground look like and where I'm supposed to run, what does the terrain look like, and make sure you have a decent plan, because everything is much easier then. So you have to do a proper analysis, both in-house to understand how are we working today. You have to understand how to set up a strategy, to understand how do we need to work in the future, and then you have to set up a plan for how do we make this transformation, because the transformation is what transformative leadership is all about. It's a change agent for ensuring the future prosperity of our organization, really. There's a lot of work, and it's not as easy as it may sound, because if you don't have a good strategy, things may go sour, you could say. And I have Kodak and Blockbuster as two examples where Blockbuster thought, well, everyone is going to rent videos forever. And they actually even offered to buy Netflix for $50 million 10 years ago. They refused because they thought Netflix was, at that time, Netflix, we should add, were a DVD mail order rental service. But they disrupted themselves, they innovated themselves from a strategic point of view. So Netflix is now very profitable, while as Blockbuster has gone bankrupt. So a very good strategy may actually make a huge difference, because if you don't work strategically from a very professional perspective, many people may be out of a job, including yourself. So that's why it's very important to all of us to actually be engaged from that point of view, make sure that our strategies are really well conducted. Now, like I said, future change will require a different type of leadership. So what we're saying is managing an uncertain future, and it's becoming more and more uncertain. That's what we're saying due to globalization and so on. It requires strategy. So in turn means future leadership is about strategic management. All right. So how many of us are familiar and know how to work with strategic management? Well, that's just the point. Future leaders must understand how to lead strategically. So it's not just about understanding strategic management, it's also about leading strategically. How do you inspire people? What kind of role will you have when you're not in a command? Tell people to do this, tell people to do that. You have to coach them, because coaching leadership is what the future is all about. So you have to work way differently with your entire interactions with your coworkers to make sure that we're actually moving in the right direction. I'm not going to go too much into that. I'll focus more on the strategy and innovation and IT part, but it's good to know. So we'll look into it, but first, where we're standing at the moment is because we have an issue, and that's in most industries, but currently I'm focusing on the IT industry. We are in a meritocracy, meaning if you're a good technological expert, you will advance in your career, right? You may start off as a programmer, then you grow, then you may get a team, and as you have a team, you may become head of a group, and then you climb the ladder. And to develop a career that way by growing, by having greater technological skills, which sometimes we will manage to get. Because the thing is, I actually run courses for teaching CIOs and IT strategists on how to work with IT strategy and digitalization. And I've taught hundreds of them over the last few years. And surprisingly enough, when they come to me, they know very little about strategic management or strategy for IT and digitalization. Hundreds and hundreds of them, where the title says IT strategist, and I have no idea how to work with IT strategy. And that's in conflict with what's called the Peter Principle. The Peter Principle means you will get promoted up to your highest level of incompetence, right? Meaning, as soon as you're competent, you will keep growing, but at some point you can't really grow anymore because you're not competent enough to climb to the next step, right? And what changes is that if you're a lead-speak leader and you're just focusing on technology, at some point you're not going to be able to grow from that point of view anymore. I mean, you might technologically grow, but you're not going to be a leader in that sense anymore. So what changes is, because there are problems with IT leaders and how to manage strategic leadership. One of them is we're too focused on operations. We love technology. We're too focused on, let's do this and let's do that now. Let's dig into, are you working with this? Let me come help you, which doesn't really help the long-term case. Like I mentioned before, there's a lack of proper skills and methodology for strategy work. There's a lot of assumptions. I've actually analyzed many, because I've been involved early in the process when the CIOs say, listen, here's our next IT strategy. Currently, we're having version 3.0. Our strategy is to, in the future, have version 4.0, which I just shake my head. What will change, just assuming what you have today will work tomorrow, which it might not at all. So understanding how to work methodology-wise with the strategy is core. That's something that is required to be able to grow above your highest level of incompetence, making sure that you become more competent in actually leading people within the industry as well. And understanding, this is really important. it's not just about composing a strategy. That's just the first step. When I worked as an IT strategist at the City of Stockholm 15 years ago, that was my first official assignment. They say, okay, listen, you're responsible for our mobility strategy for the City of Stockholm with 50,000 employees. Please bring it forward. I did. I said, now what? I said, no, you're done. And what I've learned since then is now, actually, that's just the first phase. It's like saying, listen, would you like to be a project manager for our project? And I said, oh, yeah, sure. What am I supposed to do? Oh, you just write the project plan, then you're done. Right? But that's not really. The first thing is just a plan to understand what you're supposed to do. Same is with a strategy. In fact, a strategist, someone who's responsible, whether it's a CIO, IT strategist, or someone who's just strategically responsible, first step is to make sure there's a proper strategy in place. Then everything is about making sure the change is followed through. So it's not a 3-month undertaking just writing the strategy. That's where it begins. It's like writing a project plan, then actually being the project manager for ensuring that the project actually comes through. Exactly the same thing with a strategist. It's very important to know that. I'm sorry to say, but there's very few people that are aware currently. So writing a strategy is very important work, but it's just the first phase. It's just the beginning of being a strategist. It's also very important to understand that strategies are dynamic. One interesting, very interesting thing is, I don't know, Mark, I assume many of you have worked with agile methodologies in various ways, like Scrum. And the point is, we have done so for many years. I mean, I think I started working with Scrum in 2007, 2008. Now the rest of the world is starting to understand the project should be agile, which is good. Not assuming that just because I have a plan, it will always work. Understanding we have to learn things along the way. Personally, I come from interaction design, so that was one of the core basics of working interactively. But suddenly, when we write a strategy for 5 years, we work by a waterfall model. We're assuming that will never change, which I can promise you, in 5 years, there's a lot of things that will change. So we can't sit back and relax just because we said, oh, listen, I have a plan, and it's foolproof. It will nothing will ever change. I mentioned the VUCA thing and the increased pace of change. The only thing we can be sure of is that things will change a lot, right? So from that point of view, we have to understand the strategies are dynamic. I tend to say that strategies, every good strategy is a theory. You write a strategy, but it's just actually a theory or assume could be accomplished. But so much will change along the way that you will have to be sure that whatever I thought in the beginning is not going to be what I will end up with at the end. So we have to keep criticizing our own strategy for every day, so that theory may actually be, I mean, it's a popperish kind of aspect to it, making sure that always question. It's like kill your darlings is something we tend to say. Always question your own truth. Which means strategic intelligence is not something we did just writing the strategy. We have to keep working with that and foresight to understand what about the future is changing so that I can continuously update my strategies. Another global is we treat strategies like silos. So we may have 3, 4, 5 different strategies in our organization. Many of them may have the same KPIs, but they're not coordinated. And I will go more into that, but the point is all strategies are within the same organization. There may be product strategies, there may be an HR strategy, an IT strategy, and how do they influence each other? Well, generally, one are not interconnected, which is a huge problem. So they're not driving to the same target, which they should. And they should be driven by the central strategy, the business strategy. All right, so the VUCA thing at globalization, the constant change, enhances competition. So because competition is actually what is the key aspect here. The more the more open we get, the more access to that we have, the more competitive the market will be. Because it's so much easier now than it was before, the shift over to someone else. Because you will have the full spectrum just at the internet at any point in time. Something different though is to understand how on a continuous basis to be able to ensure that, because the point is from a macroeconomic point of view, what happens is if competition becomes fierce and products or services are comparable, they're fairly the same, the only thing we can compete with is price at the end of the day. And price will keep lowering until we just cover our own costs and we don't earn anything anymore. The only way to actually to change that is to find a premium model. Is what innovation is. We have to find something that is more customer driven, that gives them more value compared to what they're paying than what our competitors do. So competition is what actually is driving innovation to begin with. So as the pace of innovation, which that's not even a question, the pace of competition is accelerating. That's why everyone is talking about innovation nowadays. And we have been doing that for the last 15 years more intensively. So innovation increases in value. And as innovation increases in value, meaning we have to understand the future more, I mean, I have to work with both incremental, semi-radical, and radical innovation. Radical meaning, what should I focus on kind of investments now to make sure we're still profitable 7 years from now? That requires a strategy. So to be able to work with innovation, strategy must be in place. But when we work with innovation, we also will understand that it amplifies the way we need to work with digitalization, because most innovations that happen nowadays are based on every take. I mean, just chopping trees, there'll be a lot of digital involved. Digging a mine, there will be a lot of digital involved. It gets into everything. To have to understand both how digital will influence non-digital innovations, but also how we can use emerging technologies in a new way to use digital innovations for non-digital innovations. In fact, digital becomes a core aspect of being innovative. And once digitalization becomes so important, the importance of IT grows as well. So overall, increased competition from a VUCA point of view leads to increased drive for innovation, strategy, and digitalization, which requires much better control of IT. Now, how do we do that control practice? Well, I'll get into it in a couple of seconds, because we do have issues. Digital and IT are not always in sync. I don't know if you noticed, but there's a lot of discussions out there over what's the difference between is digital just IT in a new shape? What is it, just old wine in new bottles? Or is it something different about digital that IT does not care, and so on? There are discussions pretty much all across the world at the moment. And what happens, I mean, in practice is digital tends to become the prodigy of the CMO. The marketing people are going in and understanding that, listen, we have business developers. They figure we can do some business development with the use of digital support. So what happens is they just go out to the market and buy all the solutions they need. They don't have to turn to IT. They buy straight off, which may be a fine way to work if that is part of your strategy. Drawbacks. For instance, shadow IT will rise severely. I think Gartner is saying that some organizations are having an IT spend that is 40% over the IT budget. So there's actually IT spend that is not defined as IT, which may be fine. I mean, we like more IT I mean, for real. But there are other flip backs for that. One naturally is that we won't really know how much IT is costing within the organization, which it becomes a bit of a black box. So if that could be steered correctly, IT could actually be in charge of 40% more budget and actually making sure to make the best use of it, rather than it just run off randomly into the neighborhood. Because one thing that will be a problem at some point is that there'll be no service level agreement control from IT. So they won't really know, oh, what happens, what does the contract look like? What happens if they go down, if the service is down for 50 days, assuming, who is it, what are the repercussions for the supplier, and so on. What happens if they go bankrupt? Do we have a contingency plan for that, and so on? Do I have to understand? Usually the CMO is not going to have a clue. He doesn't even know these things exist. He just buys it. Then if something crashes, then he'll come running to IT and say, listen, can you help me? And say, no, listen, you didn't ask me to begin with. Now it's too late. So that's where it becomes a problem. There may be a lot of application redundancy and a lot of, overflow in terms of licenses, which there are actually a lot of companies just thriving to having software and doing consultancy work for just analyzing the amount of licenses in certain companies, because the CMO may be buying a lot and he's not coordinated, so the HR may be buying a lot of the CRM system, for instance, and IT may have one as well, and so on, and we have no clue who's doing who. If that could be centralized with IT, we could actually coordinate everything to ensure redundancy is avoided. And data control, they won't know who owns the data. Is it aligned with the GDPR? What happens if we do backup of our own data? Are we allowed to? Or who actually owns the data? Does the provider own the data, the supplying company, or do we own it? Or, they are not going to know. That's IT's role, but they're not involved. Same goes with integration. Assuming business realizes, perhaps our CRM should work together with our business system, realize, well, they're two completely different suppliers, so we can't really get them to work together. So what do? Well, our hands are tied. It's up to the suppliers, unless we negotiate something at the beginning when we go into the deal, which IT may know, and most likely, the marketing department is definitely not going to know about it. They may, but from experience, generally they don't. So these things all put together really tend to turn into issues. And personally, sometimes I do recommend, it's called hybrid IT, when I actually allow, your organization overall to, it's fine, go ahead, get whatever application you want out there, but coordinate with IT first. So there will be IT applications or some that are just happening out there, but at least it's coordinated. It's being safeguarded by the IT people to make sure that it's not just running wildly out there. We have no clue what's going on. We can help negotiate. We can make sure that every application goes into the CMDB, so we know that it's follow the right type of structure. We know how support works, and so on. But that has to be part of the strategy to make sure that the CMO that they have are actually working in tandem and working together. If they're not, we're going to see that digital divide within the company, where digital is in one corner and you have IT on the other corner, and they're not really collaborating. And it happens a lot, trust me. So what we should do really is look at how do we coordinate things strategically. This is pretty simple, but it's really crucial to make sure that these things are professionally coordinated. Because top of the line should be that we have some sort of business strategy in place. I've actually gone into companies that ask me, listen, we need some help defining our digital strategy. I say, great. The digital strategy is some digital strategy. something that is derived from a business strategy. So can we look at the business strategy first and say, you mean what? And sometimes it turns out they don't even have a business strategy. And then sure, you can sit around making up something that is a digital strategy, just because it's fun. But what should be driving digital is what the business is intending to achieve. So what you do first is to make sure to have a very solid business strategy in place. Even if sometimes we can't really determine that or influence it, the organization has to. We can't put pressure on. I've even seen digital strategists that I've collaborated with that has grown into actually writing the entire business strategy, because when they say, listen, this is needed and I've understood how strategy works, okay, which is actually not having a business strategy is a really bad thing. But when you don't have one, and you're in the beginning of establishing a digital strategy, getting it right from the beginning, writing both the business strategy and the digital strategy and the rest of the strategies at the same time is actually very good. So not having one may actually be an opportunity. So don't look at it as bad, look at it as something that may actually help things along. So first you have the business strategy, then from that you make sure that you define your digitalization strategy and possibly a separate innovation strategy. They can be done at the same time. If one is before the other, it doesn't really matter. But one doesn't have to wait for the other because they have similar characteristics, and they have to be coordinated in between themselves, because else the digitalization strategy would just be something where you just sort of traditionally digitize things that are just standard, like having standard products off the shelf by Microsoft products and so on. Nothing new, nothing fancy, never developing anything that hasn't been developed before, but just doing off the shelf stuff. If you have an work with brand new stuff, it would definitely need to be connected with the digitalization strategy. So you can do brand new things. I'm not going too much into the details of IT strategy work at this session. I won't have time for it. But one thing is how your application strategy will look. And the application strategy as part of your IT strategy may say that we need to focus on strategic to actually give us a competitive edge and not just doing bread and butter applications. And if you do that, you will have to have some sort of innovation strategy to complement it. Once you've done these, as a derivation from the digitalization strategy is where the IT strategy comes. Because the business strategy, and I'm saying this as there should be separate strategies, that depends on the situation. They can be one singular strategy, all integrated, doesn't really matter. Or they could be seen upon as separate strategies, but there are actually sort of chapters or in-depth strategies of certain areas with it as a prolongment from the business strategy. The same goes once they have a digitalization strategy, which is sort of the business of how we do IT. Then you bring out the IT strategy, which is the enabler for how to ensure that technology is supporting digitalization. So sequentially, it's important to understand the business strategy should come first, or at least be guiding. That's why I'm not writing it as a waterfall model. I'm writing more as a system map where sort of the business strategy is the sun in the middle of the galaxy, and then the innovation strategy comes alongside at the same time as the digitalization strategy, and third will the IT strategy come out. When you have those, then you will be aware that, okay, what other strategies do we have that need to be interconnected? They should also be derived from the business strategy. But what I haven't really, how are all these strategies connected? In fact, it will look like a network map. Because there will be a bunch of KPIs in, say, the HR competence development strategy that is directly connected to digitalization, for instance. There may be a lot of product strategies that are directly connected both to innovation strategy and digitalization, the digitalization strategy and so on. So they have more like a network diagram connected, as with a CMDB in ITIL, where you know exactly what happens if something changes, how will that influence the other strategies and so on. And unfortunately, there are very few organizations that are working like that today. More are coming there, but it's a slow process. So what I would say is generally, if you manage to get that in an organization, you have a good opportunity to be a market leader. So once you have a strategy in place, regardless of which type of strategy, actually, in fact, all of them, when it's a business strategy and IT strategy, you would design your target operating model. Within IT, we tend to call it an IT TOM, operating model. And what that means is it's the way we operate in the future. We are already operating in some way. We do have certain processes, and we have routines, and we have certain infrastructure that supports our work. What I figure out is how will that operating model look, say 5 years from now, when our strategy has been fulfilled. So what we do is we look at what we're saying in our strategy, what we're claiming, depending on how the world is changing and how all the VUCA details and what strategic intelligence is telling us, how market trends look like, and we say, okay, this is where we need to be in 5 years. We need to, perhaps all of the partners should be distributed. We should work in these countries. We should have all digital, perhaps, and this is the process, how to get there, and so on. Then we need to figure out how will we be operating. Because just saying that we have strategic goals and we should have that type of platform. We should everyone involved in developing our product. We should. I also have to figure out how should we organize ourselves to be there. But also, what steps do we need to take? Because it's not like here is now and then is then. And there's just a vacuum in between. So it's the next finish in 4 years and 11 months, and then the strategy should be implemented in the 5th year. It's a process. That's what I'm saying. It's you have to be as strategists, you have to be change agents. You have to understand how to shift over time in the most cost efficient but also realistic way. That also helps to manage the time aspects of not being too soon doing certain things. I mean, there'll be a lot of just perhaps we need to create a new factory, or perhaps we need to move certain departments, or it's not done in a handshake. It's something that has to evolve over time. What we do when we have the strategic objectives in place, we will look at, okay, assuming this is what we're claiming, we need to have this 5 years from now. Then we'll look at, so what will it look like? How will actually things progress 5 years from now? Assuming we have that type of platform, assuming we work in every country, assuming we have 5,000 employees more than we have today, assuming all of these things, what does our actual work look like then? And that's when we use scenario planning to advise how those workflows will look 5 years from now. So we're actually concretizing our strategic goals into exactly what will it look like. And in this work, we can't sit around in the IT department doing it ourselves. We have to engage. We have to engage our coworkers from most departments. Actually, there are various reasons for this. Most of it is due to change management, really, because one thing is really important to get their input. But the other point is also planting it with them that this change is going to happen, to prepare them for, listen, we have a strategy now, things will be different in the future. We have to make you aware of this, and we'll do that. Once we have those scenarios, and there's various ways of working with scenario planning, from an IT perspective, I can compare it to sort of like fully addressed use cases, not as rigid though. And those use cases are actually more like human stories. It's storytelling for how should it work? How should that persona work, and how should that go, and what kind of roles, so on. Because once we have that, we can break that down into processes. Because if you start talking to people who work on the field, and say, listen, could you learn BPMN, business process modeling, quickly, and just draw every step you work with in a detailed diagram by Monday, people are going to lose you. Or actually, you're going to lose them. What we need to do is start off. Yep.
I'm sorry, can I interrupt?
Sure.
And our one guest, Kai, requests that could you go back to slide that links innovation to computation to strategy. For each level, what models would you use to dissect computation and which areas to focus innovation on?
This the one?
Yes, this one.
What areas?
The question is, could you go back to slide that links innovation to computation strategy for each level? What models would you use to dissect computation and which areas to focus innovation on?
What you mean by, there are a bunch of methods. You have to pick the ones that are right for you. For instance, all from porous five forces to pest-led analysis, and these things may be relevant. It depends a little on what your industry is and what you're gunning for. To do the internal analysis, you have a bunch of different methods for how to analyze your internal, from maturity and so on. There's something called polism. That's one way of dividing it. So it's like processes, the organization, leadership, infrastructure, a bunch of various areas to look at. But the more important question is finding a right, shall we say, methodology to use to know exactly what type of to ask. Because what you actually do when you do that first analysis is sort of it's an initial assessment of your maturity within different areas. When you do the other thing, you can everything from supply chain analysis to just benchmark analysis with and preferably from my point of view, you should do all of them. And also the bigger scope, doing the pest-led analysis, because once you've done the internal one, you've done the down to a SWOT analysis to make things simpler, to understand, because the SWOT actually incorporates both the strength and the weaknesses, which is internal, and the opportunities and the threats, which are external. And that will be the foundation for going into setting your strategic goals. So the first analysis part is really, really important to make sure that you understand what's the future going to, which is also sort of a scenario. Future are we going? How does megatrends look? What are our competitors doing? What's happening in other industries that may influence us? That's why the pest-led analysis is really efficient. If those are detailed, it's just similar to polism. Pest-led, that's just a way of dividing, how to look at the world. Sort of how should you slice a cake? It's still a cake, regardless of how you look at it, but you don't want to miss out on things. That's why it complements. And then there was another partial question about innovation. What innovations to focus on? Definitely depends on what the analysis said. I can't really say in general that, well, it should be artificial intelligence or it should be robotics, because it will be very different from biomedicine than it would be in manufacturing, than it would be in automotive and so on. So you have to put this together. I have 2-day, 3-day courses on just this, how you use sort of the 10 types of innovation and so on, and boil them down to details on what to focus on. And generally, this could take a little too long, but from an innovation perspective, when you meet that with the emerging technologies perspective, is actually digging down to understand what kind of needs you have, and then having the right type of scope to understand how those technologies can be applied to the type of problems you have. The innovation nowadays is different. Back in the days, we used to try to find the best solution to our problem. Nowadays, we realize that, yeah, that might be right, but it's more important to solving the right problem. And then once you find the right problem, then you can try to find the best solution for it. So innovation per se and innovation methodologies really have advanced. And that's why I'm saying this. That these need to be in tandem. So digital innovation strategy are connected. So that the way you work with innovation and the way you work with digital are actually working together. But since it's a strategy, you should hook up too much on specific technologies. Should keep that open. Like I used to work with blockchain a few years back. Then Hashgraph came along, and it's very similar. It's just a different approach. You shouldn't lock in and just saying it's blockchain, because it may be actually something completely different a year or 2 years from now. So just understanding the business concept and trying to keep an open mind to see what kind of technology is mostly relevant is actually the best way to focus. I hope I was clear enough. Else, let me know. All right, so working towards the future, once we found the scenarios and workers in our organization, we start understanding what we're going for in terms of future processes. We break them down into detailed processes, and what we do is for each process, assuming we have a general scenario, saying, oh, listen, when 5 years from now, what we will do is, instead of what we do today, we will have that connected to something, and then that opens all the doors, and that someone's automatically informed, and then that doesn't be. And when you do that, get into that type of detail, and you break that into processes, you can also start looking at, okay, so what kind of competence is required? What kind of skills from employees do we need for that process to work? But also what kind of resources and infrastructure is required? So actually all four of them means architecture, data, applications, and infrastructure. We will also look at competence to describe what our future operating model actually will have to look like. How do we organize all the resources that we have, both in terms of competence and in terms of all digital, and even non-digital, because it may influence such thing as where we should have our buildings, or do we need certain types of drones or helicopters or platform for analysis, or these things, which we will understand once we get the processes defined. We know exactly what our future organization should look like again. So that's when we start constructing it. We bunch all the competences together, and then we start working back and forth with FTEs, full-time equivalents, to see how we can build the new future roles. And then we start to work from where we are and say, okay, so how do we change over time? Do we need to recruit people? Do we need to do some competence development? We didn't realize we need certain AI or machine learning functions today, but in 2 years we do. So you can ask people, listen, would you like to be our machine learning specialist? You've been a faithful employee. We'll train you to be the leader for that area within our organization and so on. Because what he's doing now may actually not be valid. In 2 years, we need a new role. So we can school him instead, which would be an investment, and he'll be loyal for. So that's one way of putting it forward. So how to do that transformation, like I mentioned, is the strategist work. So that's the last part that I meant, is the steps of the transformation. So you will have partial target operating models, sort of for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and so on. And the point is, all of that goes into the detailed planning of our strategy work. Because the biggest mistake we can do is write a strategy and not have an action plan for it. And what we need is an action plan for our strategy and an implementation program. really. If you don't have that, you're just leaving it up to luck. You may have the best strategy that exists, but if there's no plan to how to go through with it, usually what we call those paper dragons. Because it's a great promise, but you need at least two things to make sure they come through. You need resources, and you need a mandate to make it happen. So you need to have a detailed plan for how to make that transformation from, that's where digital transformation really comes in. Digital transformation means going where we are today to what the digitalization strategies say alongside with the IT strategy to make sure we do that transformation over time to be the best digital company possible in the near future. So what we do is we do a breakdown structure from the strategic goals, which looks like this. You have a vision, then have missions, then have strategic objectives, then have strategic goals, and so on, and it breaks down. And there are various methods for that. I'm mentioning here VSEM, OGT. It's amplified a little in the with the triangle below, just to showcase that generally we have a central vision, right? And usually there's a business vision as well, hopefully. If the top management has done their work, professionally, then there's a central vision. Well, we need to understand, let's say from a digitalization, understand how can that central vision derive into a digital vision? I mean, what do we need to achieve with digital to ensure that this business vision is achieved? Because this is supporting vision. So once we have a digitalization vision, we can define from, and there's a lot of other aspects, because there will be various strategies that we need to take into account. All the things from the pest-led analysis and these things comes in. And we have to figure out, okay, so what's the strategy like? Once we have the strategy, we go into execution, which is just what I mentioned, is the action plan and the implementation program, which more concretely can look like a Gantt chart for 5 years, showing the major projects that will actually make this transformation happen. That's if you detail enough. And there are methodologies this is required for how to do that very concretely and go from the vision down to make sure all the strategies are interconnected, make sure that the results there actually are derived into an action plan and implementation program, which would be a digital transformation program or an innovation program or whatever we choose to call it, which may preferably be integrated as well. And that's the strategy of work, is to make sure they follow through, but that they are continuously reevaluated for changes that happen in the world. And at the end of the pyramid, apart from execution, if you have a good plan, it should be so well defined that it all integrates with all the annual operational plans within each department every year. That's a good integration of strategy. Just hoping that the strategy we put on the internet, forget it. It's not going to happen. They're going to have work up there to have to ensure there's resources and there's mandates, meaning at least top management would need to stand by this. They need to validate whatever extra costs this will be, because there will always be a business case in doing the transformation. We're not doing it for fun. We're doing it because it actually will help us thrive in the future. At the bottom of the pyramid, we'll have the metrics, the KPIs, if you will, to ensure that from vision, everything is concretized down to whatever metrics you have in the implementation program. Everything leads up to the business vision. There's no steering committee or board in the world that should say no to that, because that would mean whatever metrics you have that lead up to the vision that they have approved are actually contradicting themselves. So that's why we need to build it that way. We need to build something that can be manifested with top management and with whatever board or steering committee we have, to make sure that everything is well integrated all through. And if we've done all of this correctly, we integrated the strategies with each other, we've understood how digitalization, IT, innovation is working together, whatever the mutual KPIs are, and we've broken it down through the OGT I should mention as well. That's objective goals, tactics, and metrics, which is another methodology, but it works in the same with the same principle as VSAM. VSAM comes from, I think it's from Cisco originally. OGT means objectives. Objectives and goals are part of strategy, really. Tactics is pretty much the same as execution, and metrics is just the same. It's just two different aspects, and pretty much saying the same thing. So just to let you know. And if you have all of this, then you will have something that is overall, you will integrate digitalization with innovation in IT. You make sure that it's well connected with whatever top management you have to make sure that this can actually work. You have to keep reevaluating, so you can't shut down your strategic intelligence function. The sort of the pest-led thing should be ongoing. The internal evaluation should also be ongoing, because whatever first assessment or first analysis you did, you realize that you're variously mature in different parts of the organization, but you also set up goals, say, okay, this is where we are and this is where we should be, which is pretty much a gap analysis. You have to redo that. Is the gap still there? And that should be at least annually. So every year you should need to recheck if you're doing the right thing. And like I mentioned before, strategy work never ends. It's easy to think, oh, I'm a strategist. I'll just write a strategy and then I'm done. No. When you write the strategy, you're actually just describing what kind of future work you're supposed to do. That's just the first thing you do. And remember, every strategy is a hypothesis. Don't get too overexcited about what you wrote yourself. Keep questioning everything and look for new opportunities to develop your own strategy. That's professional work, if you can do that. It means continuous strategic intelligence is actually a very important part of strategy altogether. And that's why I come from a martial arts background myself, being a former world champion. Mike Tyson said, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. And I really like that from the point of view that whoever's entered a ring, before you go into a battle or a serious fight, you think, okay, I should do this and then I'll do that. Whenever he moves, I will do this, and you have a great plan. And then someone punches you in the face, you go, oh, regroup, nothing works. Then you have to be able to work from the conditions that you're. It's more important to have a strategic structure to manage whatever comes up rather than to have a too stringent plan. Same as working agile in projects. You have to work adaptively with strategies. Thanks.
Oh, it was great.
2 minutes at a time. I think I did that fairly, and I'll be happy to give my input on the questions or dialogue.
It was a great presentation. Thank you, Mr. Ozan.
Thank you. I hope
Thank you so much. It was a big pleasure.
We have questions, actually almost 10 or 12 questions. First, we should start with Ali's question. Can Tekin, could you please read the question?
Yeah, I can. I'm opening. The question is, generally companies, Mr. Ozan, we discussed this issue yesterday on the phone. I asked, generally companies charge someone or a team for innovation, like chief innovation officer. Can someone or a team make innovative whole company?
Sorry, make an innovative food company?
Whole company, yeah, whole company.
Whole company.
Yeah. I'll try to keep it short. I think one of the issues, I mean, if you do have a chief innovator, I wrote an article about this. To begin with, one should never have a chief innovation officer. You should have a chief innovation management officer.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because what innovation actually is claiming that something is innovative. But innovation management is that, no, we're building a structure for always and continuously being innovative.
Yeah.
And I've been part of the ISO team. First, I was part of the European committee, and I'm part of for the last 5 years, I've been part of the international committee to develop a standard for innovation management. And when I say that to people, listen, we're building a standard for innovation, and they just go, what? Innovation is something spontaneous. They should be creative, and you should plan for it. Yeah, that's true. But we're not discussing innovation. We're discussing innovation management, which is something different, because there will always be an innovation process. Say, first you do this, then you do that, because you always develop from a need up to something that is launched. That will always be true. Innovations that run through this process may be any type of such. And what I'm saying, the important part is not to make sure you guarantee. As an innovation person, you shouldn't just be innovative. You should be the one responsible for making everyone else innovative.
Yeah.
Perhaps
Mr.
including.
Ozan,
I don't know. Did I respond to the question? Or...
Mr. Ozan, can we give a little bit more specific dive into that? Let's say 3M. We know that company is much more innovative than any other company in the world. How do you see their management system?
I actually visited 3M in London, and they're part of the team. They're a little shy on showing the exact details though, but they're part of the. They're actually part of the technical committee as well. So whatever method they are using are integrated in the standard. And what they have is, well, a lot of it, which is a systematic structure for building your innovation capability. Meaning, and now this is perhaps a different lecture, because this takes me around 48 hours to go through in detail. But generally, let's say when you build an innovation management system, the core part of it is the innovation process. Mm-hmm. So starting from what kind of challenges you face and what kind of needs you have, and these things mentioned, you take that, you evaluate that, so you'll have a portfolio of needs. Let's call it needs, because there are opportunities and there are problems and so on, but they integrate it. You have a portfolio of needs, which goes over to the idea management phase, where you generate, ideas for how this could be resolved. There's a lot of various ways of working with defining how to work. Whether you use brainstorms or ideation software, or all of them, or you work with open innovation markets like Innocentive or Nine Sigma. Various ways. You have to have a process for understanding when should we post our problems and to which forum and so on. So what does our innovation strategy say to direct our innovation portfolio? And I have an article on my blog about how strategic portfolio management works together with operative portfolio management to ensure that the strategy is fulfilled throughout the innovation process. Because the portfolio is actually running along the entire process, even though we tend to focus after idea, you go into concept, after concept, you go into business case development and so on. So having that in place, but then again, it's a system. It's not just a process. All the support functions need to be there as well, meaning such things as funding, leadership, support. These things need to be in place as well. So it's a holistic view on innovation management rule. And that's what 3M, for instance, are having. They're following the principles of being an innovative organization, and they have the structure set up. But yet again, at the same time, the structure is also flexible. It has to be.
Mr. Ozan, also they can 3M employees are able to spend up to 15% of their time working on projects they are passionate about. 3M lets this.
Yeah, Google had 20%. One day a week you could work with anything that was innovative to them. There's huge perspectives on this, everything from culture, how to build that culture, how to allow for experimentation. And I can talk until my mouth is dry about this. Unfortunately, I only have around 10 minutes until you guys will start longer. But personally, I wouldn't mind coming back and giving you a deeper detail into how innovation management works as well. I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah,
great.
Okay.
Miss Tuche has a question. If we talk about the previous conversation, think about the previous conversation, how can we measure our company's innovation outputs? She has asked.
Oh, that's the hard part. I've, I've actually done serious work for this for 13 years. And what we generally don't measure, because we actually have developed an ISO standard for that as well, 56004, but it actually doesn't go into the metrics per se. It goes into the processes for how to measure innovation performance. What we generally don't measure is the output. We do measure is sort of if you have the maturity within the management features, similar to let's say I have a football team, and you try to measure how fast the backs are running and the forwards, how well they do, how much they train, and you have those kind of metrics, which is highly relevant. It's actually more relevant than just measuring how many goals did we score. But at the end of the day, you would have to put those into comparison to see how well do we perform with these things and what does it lead to. But the issue is, and I've done a lot of work on this. We started building us together with our industry organization, which I'm part of, in the Innovation Management Association, together with a leading professor, and we realized it's actually almost impossible to measure innovation in terms of quantitative measures, especially radical innovation, which may not be profitable until 7 years from now. So how should we measure that today? And so on. So we would have to measure, and there have been attempts. Some have said, actually, there was I'm licensed in what's called Improve, was the EU's standard method some 10 years ago for automation. And there's every new product, the amount of turnover from new products within the last 3 years, which from my point of view is actually a very poor measurement. It only says that you release new products. It doesn't say whether they're actually innovative. It doesn't say whether they're incremental or radical. It doesn't really give you a full perspective. So it doesn't say much about, it only says products. It doesn't say anything about process innovation, organizational service innovation, and so on. So it's a very narrow definition of innovation, which I completely condemn. But what we do measure are, how does your leadership work? What's your culture? I'll simplify now. What's your culture like? People being trained to be innovative? Do we have that process in place? How do we work with prototyping? How do these things? So I should measure how well you are set up to be innovative. Then if you fail anyway, at least we did the best we could as, say, football trainers. We have everything in place. Then nobody, because it's a business, so things may happen. There's a market out there. It changes. But the book best practices in innovation management to make sure that whatever 3M has done and Google has done, we've implemented. So we implemented similar things that adapt to our industry as well, and then we run for it, and hope it works. And usually it does. 99% of the cases it does. But sometimes we did something wrong, and so we have to always reevaluate, and that's also part of the standard as well. Don't get too fixated on what you're starting to look at. Always continuously reevaluate your innovation management system as well, because that way, KPMG did a global survey 2 years ago with 4,500 CIOs. 60% of global CIOs are saying they need to take responsibility. They're trying to take responsibility for innovation. But they don't know what innovation management is to begin with. and why they do that is because innovation turns to be digital. So digitalization, that's what I've been saying. Innovation and digital are so closely interrelated. But should the CIO be responsible for innovation management? I would say probably not, but better him than no one else.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We have also one more question from Kay. First of all, he is curious about your courses and your articles where he or she can find, and also she asks if
Yeah.
the
You mentioned
presentation will
about
be
the
available. Yeah,
innovation courses,
yeah.
and he asked that how can I reach this kind of course?
But that's the last question. Before that, she or he asked, with this coming around, especially due to the COVID-19, senior management often fail to understand importance of linking strategy to innovation, digital innovation.
Yes.
Any tips, convenience, show them why it is critical?
Okay, that was 3 questions. Let me take them separately. First, if you want to read my articles, they're on håkanozan.net. My courses, I'm currently mostly running them in Swedish. I collaborate with IDG, and they're on the dialogue to launch them internationally as well. Else, I'm a course provider, so I really don't run them myself. I'll just provide the content. So anyone in Turkey, for instance, that would like to run my courses, I can set it up with them. But they will be the organizers and invite people. Any one of you who will be interested, I can collaborate with you. I have all the content prepared. I'm ready to go. We can do it online, and we can do it next week. It's just I don't run them myself. I run them in collaboration with other units that have people that are interested. And I have currently therefore one is on innovation, more strategic innovation management. It's a 2-day course. One for running digital innovation projects. I have one on IT strategy and digitalization, which is a 1-day course, full-day course, and one on target operating model design, which is more strategy implementation, how you do that, like I showed you an overview of. What's the third one?
It is about the senior management often fail to understand importance of linking strategy to innovation
Yes.
or digital innovation. Any tips, convenience, show them why it is critical.
Yeah, and actually I do have a methodology for that. It's actually part of one of the courses. Because it happens every time. Because people that tend to come to my courses are those that have understood how important innovation is. They have understood that innovation management is something we need to understand more of, but they don't really have the obvious acceptance from their own leaders. What I have integrated is a sort of a change management structure for how you can build your case internally. First thing is create a sense of urgency. It just makes it simple. And you have to look at your you have to look at what's happening in the surrounding world, have to look at what the competitors are doing, and build a case for it. Then you take it sequentially. So what you actually do is sort of build a minimum viable product of a strategy. Because the first thing you will need to do is, one, you will do an innovation management assessment within your organization. You can always do a light one. It's very simple. It doesn't take that long. It's not that thorough. It's not enough from, but it's good enough to get you. I mean, what you need actually is a PowerPoint to show the leadership team how bad you're performing in terms of innovation. That alongside with what the competitors are doing, where the markets are going, and what our own strategy might actually be saying, which we're not delivering on. When you put these together, you build a case so strong. There are a few leadership teams that was just a short tip of how I usually advise people to approach it, because it works. It does work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And
You're welcome.
Mr. Ozan, the last question comes from Mr. Mehmet. He has worked in a developer company, and he asks what SMEs should do to build a strategic planning in their infrastructure.
Very similar. Depends on the size of the SME. Because the point is, strategy becomes more and more important as I say organizations, because it's not just companies, also public organizations. As organizations grow, because as we grow, we have to build more routines to make sure things just run wild. And building more routines is the same thing as bureaucracy. And generally, bureaucracy is what is stopping innovation and stopping actually transformation overall, both digital digital. And so when you don't have the routine, it's easy to just do something because there are no fixed routines anyway. But the larger we get, the more we have to structure ourselves. And the more we structure ourselves, the more rigid we become. And the more rigid and robust we are, the more difficult it will be to do digital innovation, for instance. So making sure that we get a new strategy in place is completely crucial to ensure that, you know, these changes are going to happen. But let's assume you're like an SME with 10 employees. Well, it's not going to be that hard to implement, but it's still going to be as valid because your business plan will be your business strategy, and that has to follow the same structure and the same route as any business strategy, really, because the business plan is the business strategy. There's no difference. And the strategy is, where should we be in 5 years or 10 years, and what's our vision, and what's our mission, and what are our strategic objectives, and so on. So it's very similar, follows the same structure. It's just way easier to implement, and you don't have to fight as many opponents to make the change as you do with well, the best. I mean, small to medium size. I think medium size by EU's definition is like 250 employees, and that will be pretty much be the same problem, because with 250 employees, you're actually pretty large, and you will have a lot of routines in place. If you're less than 100, it's easier. So the larger you get, the more bureaucracy you have, the tougher it will be, but also the more challenging. And from my point of view, challenges is the fun part. If it was easy, I wouldn't even want to do it.
Yeah.
I hope that was a good response to the question.
I
Also,
think so.
one question more.
Yeah.
One of my guests, maybe it can be lost. Hi, I have a question. Can innovation auditable? How can we audit the innovation?
John Tikin, we also one more question. So this is the previous one before the last.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, it depends on what you mean by audit, because the ISO standard, for instance, which if it was a 56001 standard, could be officially audited. I developed a system for that within KPMG, who's an auditing company, and we built a structure that was aligned with, I don't even know the numbers, but some auditing standard 380 something. So everything was aligned to the ISO standard and to relevant standard and to auditing standard and so on. There's no formal auditing methodology really for innovation, or innovation management, I should say. It's innovation management that you audit. But if you look at the strategy, it also says there should be innovation audits continually. And what we mean by that is you should actually reevaluate. You should do a continuous innovation management assessment to evaluate the innovation management system, meaning how well does it perform and how well has it been implemented compared to your innovation strategy. So that is actually the audit you do, and then you have managerial reviews following up that. Then you make the right corrections to your efforts to update that, to say, oh, do we need to make any changes and so on. So that's a continuous non-audit from that point of view. I mean, from we're talking economics, is a different type of audit. But you audit your innovation management system to see how well it's following the expected structure. So I hope that was a fair response to the question.
Yeah, thank you. And the last question comes from Mr. Güler. Do you think that intrapreneurship program is most appropriate tool for better innovation management inside the company? What other tools can be applied?
Good question.
Yes. Yes, and there are a bunch of aspects to that. One is how to set up your incentives program, how to motivate people, which in turn is done to help support innovation culture. So, it's very easy, because this was my research field some 10 years ago, how to drive incentives. Why would people want to participate and so on? You have to figure out what the incentives are for various people. Not everyone is just going along. Actually, we did a research project where we did within employees in a large company, as an airline, and we evaluated what the biggest driver was for participating as intrapreneurs, in-house innovators. And it turned out no one was actually prioritizing getting a high salary or getting career choices. But that depends on the organization and the situation they're in, of course. But 100% of the respondents in our study said that the first and out for participating is just to make it easier for myself. Just have people listen. I have a great idea. Why can't we just do this? And people say, "Oh no, we don't have the time. We don't have the effort." People get frustrated. You actually see the solution. You just want someone to listen to you and make that change happen, because it has a lot to do with involvement. There's the two various ways of incentives: intrinsic and extrinsic motives, right? And all extrinsic motives are usually driven by intrinsic motives. You have something intrapersonal that you care about. You'd like to feel, like you're performing well, or you like to feel proud of what you do and so on. It's much more important than getting getting $100. Because the $100 you need to do something else that is intrinsic. So I figured out how people work, making sure that you have the right type of, and usually what you set up internally is a sort of incubation program. But that's part of the innovation management system. This is, I can go on for hours, but because that's how we spur entrepreneurship. But from my point of view, anyone can be an entrepreneur. There are no limits per se. It's just awareness that, if someone promotes something, they will actually listen to it. It's a progress in place. We can do prototypes. We can actually do, I will help build a business case. I may actually take this outside and be an entrepreneur and deliver to my own company if they don't think it's within their business strategy, but it's still valuable to them, and so on. So depending on what is meant by entrepreneurship program, regardless, I fully agree, because since one of my research fields were open innovation, which means have everyone involved, everyone from employees to actually your customers or your clients, and even external innovators, and make sure you have the right mix of competence for the right type of problem. Yes, every customer should be an entrepreneur as well. So it's just how to set up your innovation management system to make sure, because what happens is, even when you get ideas and comments from outside, is often more valuable to the organization, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because they have a different, they're outside of the box. What we try to do is think outside of the box, right? They're already outside the box. So they will have a brand new perspective of your problem rather than you will. So it's about putting these and combining these together. An entrepreneurship program is as valuable as a customer innovation program.
Also, some of the companies organizing open innovation competition in order to gather idea.
Yes, and the problem is, I collaborate with many of the Bright Ideas, one of the big. They have issues because they have a software. And I met their CEO in New York about a year ago. What they say is, we have issues because people come to us, they buy the platform, then they run the project, then they come back to us and say, listen, it doesn't work. And the platform works. Exactly. They have the system in place to begin with, because if they don't have funding to take the ideas to concepts and further, it's just going to be face value for all of it. So you have to have everything in place. Who's going to evaluate the ideas? What will be the criteria for evaluating ideas? What areas should we focus on? Are there any priorities and so on, which is actually defined in the innovation strategy? So if you don't have the whole thing in place, sure, you can start off with open things just to get things on the road, but you still have to get the whole. It's like in the 90s when e-commerce was starting along, and everyone they put up a website and then started getting orders. Then they realized, we don't have the products, we don't have the stores, we don't have the warehouse logistics, nothing in place. You have to have those things in place as well, preferably first before you do the rest. So the web extension of something you already have in place.
It was a great answer, Mr. Ozan. And thank you very much for joining us. It was invaluable knowledge that you have shared. We are honored to be with you here. And please trust me, I have lots of comments and feedbacks that if you know earlier as a company we would attend. And do you think you can remake it again? And can he join us again? And hopefully we see you in our webinars next time as well.
Sure. Yeah, I loved it, and